So good morning, everyone, and welcome. I think I know most everyone here, and there'll be some people coming in over the next few minutes. But in case I have not formally met you, I'm David Edelman, the United States Ambassador here in Singapore, and on behalf of my wife Caroline, our family, and our entire U.S. Embassy team here, we are delighted to have you on this early Sunday morning to celebrate three magnificent American writers. Before I do so, a little bit of protocol. I want to acknowledge and thank my friends from the diplomatic corps in Singapore. The ambassador from Peru, the ambassador from Spain are both here with their beautiful wives, and the wife of my friend, the High Commissioner from India, is also here. So thank you very much, Excellencies, for joining us. I said to Caroline this morning, I said, you know, my remarks are a little bit long for a Sunday morning, and she said, don't worry, I'll be seated. So if you'll bear with me, I really do want to give as full an introduction as I can to three magnificent authors who, each of whom, have come here from New York City, and you know what that means this week. So they've gone to great lengths to get through the floodwaters and despite the power outages and fly across the world to the other side of the world to be with us as part of the Singapore Writers Festival, which our embassy is very proud to support, as we have done for many years. The first author I want to introduce, and I guess we'll do these in alphabetical order, how's that, is Michael Cunningham. Michael Cunningham is the author of several novels, A Home at the End of the World, Flesh and Blood, many of you know his work, The Hours, and Specimen Days. And he won the prestigious PEN/Faulkner Award and also a Pulitzer Prize for The Hours. I mentioned The Hours because many of you might recognize that particular book. In 2002, it was made into a film which starred Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman, Julianne Moore, and Ed Harris. But before he authored The Hours and his other works, Mr. Cunningham studied English and literature at Stanford University. As I mentioned, he's currently residing in New York City, but he is on the faculty at Yale. The second author I want to introduce is Mick Foley. Mick penned his own memoir called Have a Nice Day. He wrote, is this right, Mick? Some 200,000 words in longhand in 50 days. The book shocked the literary world by hitting #1 on the New York Times bestseller list in October of 1999, where it remained for 26 weeks.
Or remained on the list.
Remained on the list.
Top of the list.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, 1 week. So.
He followed up with a book cleverly entitled Foley is Good, which also hit #1 on the New York Times list. And he's now published a total of 10 books, 4 memoirs, 4 children's books, and 2 novels. Now, for those of you who do not recognize him, and some on the staff you should know, Mick did recognize you for this, he is also a former professional wrestler who competed under the name Cactus Jack in Mankind. So, welcome to Cactus Jack. Mick was featured in a 2010 story on ABC's World News Tonight for his work as an online volunteer with, and do we say this, RAINN?
RAINN, yes.
With RAINN, which is our nation's largest anti-sexual assault organization. We should also mention that he has been awarded the Medal of Reasonableness from the comedian Jon Stewart, who lives in New York, and Mick lives in New York with his 4 children. Is that right? 4 children. Finally, the third author I want to introduce is Monique Trong. She was born in Vietnam, emigrated to the United States in 1975 with her family, lived in North Carolina and Texas and other places before settling in Brooklyn, New York. Her first novel is called The Book of Salt, and it was a national bestseller and the recipient of the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award and the Bard Fiction Prize, amongst many other awards. In 2003, The Book of Salt was honored as a New York Times Notable Fiction Book, a Chicago Tribune Favorite Fiction Book, one of the Village Voice's 25 favorite books, and one of the Miami Herald's top 10 books, among many other citations. You get the picture. Her second novel, Bitter in the Mouth, was the inaugural selection of the Ladies' Home Journal Book Club. The novel received the Rosenthal Family Foundation Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, was named a 25 Best Fiction Books of 2010 by Barnes & Noble, one of the 10 Best Fiction Books in 2010 by Hudson Booksellers, and the Adult Fiction Honor Book by the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association. I should also mention that Monique is an intellectual property attorney, and although she doesn't like to confess to that, but in this home you should know Monique. You make no apologies because I'm a lawyer as well. So it's my pleasure to welcome these three magnificent American authors to be with you here in Singapore. We're delighted to be with so many of our friends here and leaders of the arts community. These authors are making the rounds in Singapore, and there are several public events. I guess they began on Friday night, and there's a few to remain before they head back to New York. But we wanted to invite some of our close friends in this morning for a little bit of an opportunity to really get to know the authors, meet them, hear their story, their inspiration, if you will. This is part of what Caroline and I set as our goal when we arrived in Singapore a better part of 3 years ago now, and that was to do the traditional diplomatic work, the work on security issues, the work on trade and investment, but really to redouble our emphasis on the arts and literature. I think that over the long term, that's the best way to build on what is already quite a strong U.S.-Singapore partnership and friendship. It is these people-to-people type of relationships built on common values, a love and appreciation for art and literature, and I can think of no better way than doing so than bringing three outstanding American writers to Singapore. So we are delighted to have you all here and delighted to have you as guests. I will say that we had intended to have copies ready, packaged, wrapped, signed for each one of you of the important novels. We are delighted the authors were able to escape Hurricane Sandy and get here. Unfortunately, the books did not make the trip. I know the way these things always are. They're going to show up tomorrow morning, for sure. But what Eric and Chad and the staff have done over the last couple of days to try to make up for that is they've run all over Singapore, going to every bookstore, buying every copy of these authors' books. So the good news and bad news in that. The good news is we do have some copies of their books for you today. The bad news is if you don't pick up the copy here, you will not be able to find it. And we even checked the copies out of the libraries. The authors would be pleased to know. So I hope at the conclusion of their presentations, you'll enjoy a little bit of breakfast, pick up at least one copy of the book, and spend some time speaking with these magnificent authors. So if you would join me in first welcoming all three, and then we're going to ask Michael Cunningham to come up and begin the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Thank you all for coming. I am going to read briefly a sort of sentimental favorite of mine from The Hours. You know, a novel can formulate itself in so many different ways. The obvious way, of course, is to write a first sentence and follow it with a second sentence and continue until you reach the last sentence. I'm not quite so well organized, and I'm going to read a condensed version of really the first passage I wrote for The Hours. It occurs around the middle, and the book sort of coalesced around this short passage. The Hours concerns, it's really three stories, one of which is the story of Virginia Woolf. I I love. And one of the many things that is so moving to me about her is, as I'm sure many of us know, she was deeply troubled. She had good periods, and she had she had periods for which the term depression feels a little mild. And she did ultimately end her life during a very bad period. But one of the things that has always so impressed me about her is that while it's difficult to imagine anybody better acquainted with the darkness that can be a part of a human life, I know very few writers who wrote so persuasively and so simply and beautifully about the joy of being alive. What she left behind was not really about sorrow and mortality. It was about beauty, of being here, like that. So I wanted to presage her suicide, and at the same time make it clear that that's not the most important thing about her. That she had a whole life that can't be summed up by a very bad day in which she did a terrible thing. And somehow I wrote this as a sketch and built a book around it. In this short section, the introduction will take longer than the reading. She is living, her husband Leonard has taken her to live in the suburbs because London is simply too much for her. It just overwhelms her and sends her into these terrible states. So they're living out in the suburbs, and she is being visited by her sister Vanessa. Vanessa was a painter, not a painter we especially revere today, though Virginia at the time thought of herself as this sort of matronly, stick-like, ungiving creature, and that Vanessa, with her prolixity and her painting and her 3 husbands and 7 affairs and her children, to be the true woman, to be the healthy one. So in this section, Virginia is being visited in her suburban house by Vanessa and Vanessa's 3 children. She's begun to write Mrs. Dalloway, her first great novel, and in fact, in the early, when she started Mrs. Dalloway, she believed she was going to write about a society matron who was going to commit suicide, and then changed her mind in the writing of Mrs. Dalloway. I don't think this would be a spoiler to those of you who have not read Mrs. Dalloway. In the eponymous book, Mrs. Dalloway does not commit suicide. So that was pretty much the only exception for her. So Virginia and Vanessa have gone out into the garden where the children are playing. "Hello, changelings," Virginia calls. "We found a bird," Angelica announces. "It's sick." "So I understand," Virginia answers. It's alive," Quentin says with scholarly gravity. I think we might be able to save it." Vanessa squeezes Virginia's hand. "Oh," thinks Virginia, "just before tea, here's Dad. What exactly does one say to children, or to anybody?" "We can make it comfortable," Vanessa says, "but this is the bird's time to die. We can't change that." Just so, the seamstress cuts the thread. "This much, children, no less but no more." Vanessa does not harm her children, but she does not lie to them either, not even for mercy's sake. "We should fix a box for it," Quentin says, "and bring it into the house." "I don't think so," Vanessa answers. "It's a wild thing. It will want to die outdoors." "We shall have a funeral," says Angelica brightly. "I shall sing." Julian says there are 3 kids. We should make a bed of grass for it. Angela, you pick some. Yes, Julian, Angelica says. She obediently sets about pulling up handfuls of grass. We pick some roses, too, Virginia says to Angelica. Yes, Angelica answers, still busy with the grass. They're the yellow ones. Before going with Angelica into the rose garden, Vanessa stands another moment, still holding hands with her sister, watching Vanessa's children as if they were a pool of water into which she might or might not dive. This, Virginia thinks, is the true accomplishment. This will live after the Tinsley experiments in narrative have been packed off along with the old photographs and fancy dresses, the china plates on which grandmother painted her wistful, invented landscapes. She disengages her hand and goes into the garden, where she kneels beside Angelica and helps her create a bed in which the thrush can die. Quentin and Julian stand close by, but Angelica is clearly the most enthusiastic member of the funeral party, the one whose tastes in decoration and decorum must be respected. Angelica is somehow the widow here. There now, Virginia says, as she and Angelica arrange grass into a billowy little mound. She should be quite comfortable, I think. Is it a she? Angelica asks. Yes, the females are larger and a bit more drab. Does she have eggs? Virginia hesitates. I don't know, she says. We can't tell, really, can we? When she's dead, I shall look for her eggs. If you like, there will be a nest in Eve somewhere. I shall find them, Angelica says, and hatch them. Quentin laughs. Will you send them yourself, he says. No, stupid, I shall hatch them. Ah, says Quentin. And without seeing them, Virginia knows he and Julian are laughing quietly at Angelica, and perhaps by extension at her. Even now, in this late age, the males still hold death in their capable hands and laugh affectionately at the females, who arrange funerary beds and who speak of resuscitating sparks of nascent life abandoned in the landscape by magic or sheer force of will. All right then, Virginia says. We're ready for laying out. No, says Angelica, there's still the roses. She takes one of the yellow roses they've picked and places it carefully along the edge of the grass mound. She adds another and another until she has created a rough circle of rosebuds, thorny stems and leaves. That's nice, she says, and surprisingly, it is. Virginia looks with unanticipated pleasure at the modest circlet of thorns and flowers, this wild deathbed. She would like to lie down on it herself. Shall we put her in then? She says softly to Angelica. She leans toward Angelica as if they shared a secret. Some force flows between them, a complicity that is neither maternal nor erotic, but contains elements of both. There is an understanding here. There's some sort of understanding too large for language. Virginia can feel it as surely as she feels weather on her skin. But when she looks deeply into Angelica's face, she sees by Angelica's bright, unfocused eyes that she's already growing impatient with the game. She's made her arrangement of grass and roses. Now she wants to dispatch the bird as quickly as possible and go hunting for its nest. When Quentin takes his hands away, Virginia can see that the bird is laid on the grass compactly, its wings folded up against its body. She knows it has died already, in Quentin's palms. It seems to have wanted to make the smallest possible package of itself. Its eye, a perfect black bead, is open. And its great feet, larger than you'd expect them to be, are curled in on themselves. Vanessa comes up behind Virginia. "We flee for now, everyone," Vanessa says. "We've done what we can." Angelica and Quentin disperse willingly. Angelica starts her circuit of the house, squinting up at the eaves. Quentin wipes his hands on his jersey and goes inside to wash up. Julian stays with Vanessa and Virginia, still in attendance on the roof course. He says, "Angie got so excited about the nest, she forgot to select them." Vanessa says, "Well, should we be denied tea at all for coming so early?" "No," Virginia answers, "I'm fully equipped to make tea without assistance for Nellie." "Well then," Vanessa says. And she and Julian turn and walk back to the house. Julian's hand slipped into the crook of his mother's elbow. Before following them, Virginia lingers another moment beside the dead bird in its circle of roses. It could be a kind of hat. It could be the missing link between millinery and death. She would like to lie down in its place. Not denying it. She would like that. Vanessa and Julian can go on about their business, their tea and travels, while she, Virginia, a bird-sized Virginia, lets herself metamorphose from an angular, difficult woman into an ornament on a hat. A foolish, uncaring thing. Clarissa Dalloway, she thinks, will not be the bride of death after all. Clarissa will be the bed in which the bride is laid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Isn't this a great way to start the day?
All right, Pulitzer Prize winner. And I'm supposed to follow that. In wrestling, we look at it and expect me to follow that. So, here I am with my wrestling memoir. Follow the hours.
Believe me, I couldn't take you on wrestling.
I was trying to figure out what I would read here. I expected a really small gathering. As a matter of fact, when we were driving around looking for the house, we saw what appeared to be this great party going on with these cool guests entering. And then when we realized that this was our gathering, it seemed a little bit ominous. So I had to pick out a suitable entry here to read. And what I thought I'd do is kind of pick up on the international theme here and maybe even talk about a meeting I had with somebody that some of you, like the ambassador, may know. And I pick up where I was a little concerned about being at a dinner in Washington, D.C. with former Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz, because I had written a previous memoir about our first meeting, and I had said something about him that I thought was kind of unforgivable. I'd specifically mentioned in diaries, which would be hardcore diaries, the blast of Wolfowitz's breath would have dropped a lesser man. Ouch. Kind of hard to be friends after a remark like that. I mean, disagreeing on foreign policy is one thing. Writing about a man's halitosis is pretty much a non-negotiable non-starter. So during the course of the dinner, I did what I thought was the manly, hardcore thing to do. I hid from Paul Wolfowitz. Hid from Wolfie as if it was my turn to pick up the tab at a Devastation Incorporated reunion dinner. The vague Texas wrestling mention there. Finally, after hours of regaling troops injured in real battles with my own exaggerated tales of injuries suffered in make-believe battles, I headed for the door, knowing I had a good 300-mile drive in front of me. Thankful I'd been spared any type of incident with the notorious Teen Wolf. Yes, I know Wolfowitz wasn't technically been a Teen Wolf since the early 60s. I'm just about out of Wolf references. Suddenly, from across the room, I saw Wolfie's eyes glare at me as he started his move. I was headed for the door and had a sizable lead on him, but Wolfowitz was like a linebacker, heading me off at the pass with a precise angle of pursuit. He was going to catch me, interrogate me, breathe on me. "Excuse me, are you Mick Foley?" he said, not angry, not even a little tired from the journey across the restaurant. "Well, yes, sir, I am. How are you, Dr. Wolfowitz?" Trying to be polite, buying a little time before bolting out the door. "I just want to thank you for all you do for our troops," Wolfie said, serious, complimentarily. Hard to really hate a guy who's being so nice to you. "Well, thank you, sir," I said. "Okay," I thought, time to leave. Maybe just one polite question before heading out. How is everything at the World Bank, sir?" Wolfowitz groaned, letting out a blast of breath that was minty fresh. What the heck? I'd expected Nosferatu and gotten Stacy Keebler instead. Because Stacy's breath when I first met her was so double mint delicious. Stacy once ate a tuna fish sandwich while sitting next to me on a plane, where, I should mention, she specifically asked a passenger if they could move so she and I could hang out, and she even made that smell good. Wait, where was I? Oh yeah, Wolf. I tend to go off on tangents, right? If you thought the Pentagon was full of bureaucrats, you ought to try getting something done at the World Bank, Wolfie explained. "That must be frustrating, sir." "Well, it is," he said, "especially if you're trying to make decisions that could improve millions of lives. You know, Dr. Wolfowitz, along with what I do with the troops, world poverty is one of my great passions. Hey, maybe as long as I was talking with one of the most influential people in the world, I could score a couple points." "Really?" he said, intrigued. "Yes, sir, that's true," I said. "I sponsor 7 kids around the world with Child Fund International." "Which countries?" the World Bank head honcho asked. "Well, I have 3 kids in Mexico, 1 in the Philippines, 1 in Sri Lanka, and a wonderful little child in Sierra Leone." "Sierra Leone," Wolfowitz said. "I sponsor a child there too." For the next several minutes, it was just me and him, a battered old wrestler and the president of the World Bank, chatting like old friends, gossiping like schoolgirls, carrying on about things like the illicit diamond smuggling trade in Sierra Leone, child soldiers, amputation by machete, little things like that. And it dawned on me that none of my friends at home would give a crap about the diamond smuggling trade in Sierra Leone. Wait, check that. John McNulty might. Maybe Steve's angry too. But none of the others. Certainly not Imbro, who never seems to tire of personal anecdotes about Christie Canyon, but would shield himself from stories of any emotional depth as if he was Dracula fending off the first rays of daybreak. Yet here was Wolfie, a guy I claimed to hate, a guy whose very breath I'd cast aspersion on, hanging out with me, trading concerns about the developing world. It felt like such a phony. Like a beauty contestant claiming natural seeds when the slightest feel, the most tender touch, the simplest tweak would have exposed the perfect and possibly rounded gravity-defying truth. I'm talking about boobs here. This talk with Wolfie seemed to be tweaking a nipple of its own, a nipple of my conscience. And it was doing it in a less gentle way than I would have found preferable. I just couldn't take it. "Sir, may I be honest with you?" I said. "Of course," Wolfie assured me. "Okay, do or die time here." He really had a grip on that thing, twisting it around metaphorically like he was trying to tune into the Opry, live from Nashville on an AM radio in the old days, all the way from Missouri on a cloudy night. "Well, sir, I never really liked you." A hearty laugh from the Wolfmeister, followed by an explanation from the hardcore legend, and then discussions on the war in Iraq, the care of our wounded veterans, and the benefits of mosquito netting in lands across the world. I rolled into my driveway around 5 a.m. was awoken by my 5-year-old son Hugh's pre-dawn declaration, "I'm awake, Dad." About half an hour later, I felt weary, hungover, though I hadn't had a drop of alcohol. My wife wandered in, taking note of my precarious perch atop a child's bunk bed. "Oh man, I feel so guilty," I said to my wife. "What did you do, Mick?" Colette said, knowing that from time to time during the course of our marriage, I'd sought solace in the arms of bored housewives, grieving widows, adventurous grandmothers, defrocked nuns and sexy Republican women. Author's note, the admission of solace seeking is purely fictional, as is, to the best of the author's knowledge, the rumored existence of sexy Republican women. Oh, no, it's nothing like that, I assured her. It's just that I talked to Paul Wolfowitz last night. Wolfowitz, Colette said. You hate that guy. That's nothing to feel guilty about. Yes, it is, I said, because I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mick. Terrific. What a contrast, huh? Monique, both tough acts to follow. But we know you're up for the challenge. Please.
All right. Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you for being here. And I feel like the only way that I could follow up is if I could sit down at this grand piano and sing you a tune or something. But unfortunately, I can't. So it'll be from the, my second novel that I'll be reading from today. I'd like to tell you a little bit about it. It's called Bitter in the Mouth, and it's really my my take on sort of the classic American genre, American Gothic, Southern Gothic rather. And the first place that my family and I came to in 1975 in the U.S. was a very small town in North Carolina called Boiling Springs. And you have to agree, Boiling Springs is a perfect Southern Gothic, name for a town. And so I decided that I would revisit and in many ways try to reclaim those years in North Carolina by setting my second novel there. I like to often say to people that I consider myself a Southern girl twice over. And what I mean by that is I was born in Saigon, in South Vietnam, but I grew up in Boiling Springs, North Carolina. The main character is named Linda Hamrick, and she has a neurological condition that causes her to taste words. So when she speaks or hears certain words, they trigger a flavor for her. And when I first heard about this condition, I thought, this is amazing. This is so perfect. If I said apple, I could taste that sort of crispy, sort of Macintosh, apple. But unfortunately, that's not how the condition works. What happens is actually the combination of word and flavor have no sort of definitional connection. So my main character could say apple, and she could taste black pepper. But the combination is always the same. I should say that my first book, The Book of Salt, was about a young Vietnamese man who was working as a live-in cook for the American writer Gertrude Stein and her lover Alice B. Toklas. So I have a very deep connection with food, and I thought that this, to write about someone with this condition, this particular form of synesthesia, would be a wonderful way to sort of revisit how to express flavors and how to explore flavors, but not through the context of culinary, through the kitchen, through something completely just wonderfully subjective, to try to make flavors new again for my readers.